I like Tomb Raider Chronicles, but my history with it is a checkered one. When I played it for the first time, I wasn't terribly fond of it. The concept sounded great on paper. Lara Croft had been declared dead after the events of the last revelation, and her grieving friends came together to remember some of her past adventures that we then got to play. But in practice, it felt more like a stew of leftovers that didn't fit in anywhere else. Ingredients included a story that contradicted previously established lore, puzzles requiring the second sight to be solved, and badly implemented gameplay elements like that half-baked stealth mechanic, which was technically a puzzle in itself because it required you to know that you could sneak up on enemies by walking. Something that had never been possible in the series before, wasn't explained in the tutorial, and didn't even make much sense because Lara's footsteps while walking were just as loud as those produced by running. And let's not forget this game's version of Lara herself, who, even though she's a teenager in only one of the 4 chapters, still behaves like an uppity child throughout most of the game. Seriously, even the psychotic crybaby from Shadow of the Tomb Raider made more sense to me.
Whew, that girl has got one bad attitude.
I've been speaking about these problems in the past tense, as if the remaster had done anything to fix them. That's obviously not the case. It's just my perception that has changed over the years. As I've said in my videos about other games, they become a lot more fun once you know them better, and the same holds true for Chronicles. Once I got past being bothered by its moon logic puzzles and accepted that both the plot holes and Lara's obnoxious personality were probably results of her friends' fragmented recollections, I could finally start enjoying the game. Nowadays, I even consider it my 3rd favourite classic after TR3 and 2, better than 1, which is a little bit boring, Angel of Darkness, which is a little bit broken, and The Last Revelation, which is a little bit of everything terrible. It may not have many levels that are as great as the other game's top 5, but there also aren't any that I hate. With this in mind, let's put an end to this lengthy intro and start ranking the levels of Tomb Raider Chronicles from worst to best. Number 12. The Base. As I said, I don't actually dislike any of the levels in Chronicles, but one has to be at the bottom, and here it is, the opening of the Russia section, because it's comparatively the least fun and the least visually appealing, despite a few cute little snowflakes. And I'm not just talking about the level itself, but also Lara. I never liked her in-game model in the original graphics, perpetually frowning as if someone had scared her awake in the middle of the night with a wet fart to the face, and then they also put her in that hideous grey potato bag. Fortunately, those times are over. Both her face and outfit look way better in the remaster, and compared to TR1's Cistern, 2's Living Quarters and 3's Hell's Gate, my least favourite Chronicles level still wins by a long shot. Like with most of this game's levels, its spatial dimensions are quite manageable, focusing on puzzles, obstacles and enemies within a given area, rather than traversing long distances and getting lost in the process. As a child, it still took me some time and courage to get past the very first room with its remote-controlled crane trap, which used to make me very nervous. Imagine my relief when I was finally able to shoot that evil worker to hell. That being said, I wish the base featured a little more combat, something I don't usually ask for, but it would have been fitting in this context, while also giving the Desert Eagle we can find in a locker more to do before it gets stolen from our inventory in between this level and the next. Number 11. Sinking Submarine. Let's be honest, we all knew that the closest thing Chronicles has to a water level would end up near the bottom of my list, didn't we? And if I hated it, like most examples of its kind, I would probably call it the Stinking Submarine. But there aren't any dark underwater mazes here, so why would I hate it? Instead, this level keeps the basic layout of the previous one, but rearranges it to accommodate the fact that the submarine is about to implode. Realistic obstacles that weren't there before, like burning oil and loose cables electrifying the water, as well as the submarine's alarm siren sounding in the background throughout the entire ordeal, help create the feeling of a panic-fueled escape from certain death. I think it could even have raised the stakes a little more by adding a timer and a few action sequences of Lara sprinting through corridors that collapse behind her, with water splashing everywhere and engulfing her eventually, similar to the opening cutscene of the reboot, but that might have been too complicated for the engine. Instead, we get a pretty dramatic conclusion to what I consider to be the strongest mini-arc of Tomb Raider Chronicles. In one of the few instances of Lara not acting like an immature brat in this game, she realizes that the artifact she and the antagonist had been looking for is too dangerous and should rather be left alone at the bottom of the ocean. She even tries, albeit to no avail, to rescue the admiral who took her prisoner because she understands that he's a victim in this too. And while I usually play the game in English, in this case I actually prefer the German voice acting, because instead of saying,
"Goodbye, Admiral,"
in an almost playful tone, as she leaves him to his fate, German Lara briefly speaks to him in his own native language, making the scene hit harder in my opinion.
Do svidania, Admiral. Ouch!
Number 10. Labyrinth. Even though I'm actually quite fond of Ireland, the middle level doesn't convince me till this day. The creepy chapel at the start is quite possibly one of my favourite locations in this game as far as visuals and atmosphere are concerned, but gameplay-wise, it's quite unclear what to do or how to avoid the invisible skeleton's swords. Oh well. Playing as young Lara, with medipacks as the only consumables to collect, we also need a reason to use them, I suppose. Unfortunately, everything gets even stranger, and not necessarily in a good way, after the chapel. The next part presents us with a mechanism to rotate a tower with bridges over 3 different trap rooms, creating the illusion of several paths through the level, when in reality, there's only one viable path forward that we just have to find through trial and error. Too bad, because the idea behind this was actually quite promising and raises many interesting questions about why there's an area like this underneath a chapel. Once that's been taken care of, everything ends with one of my most hated things in video games, a maze, which was bound to come up sooner or later, given the level's name. Luckily, this one isn't so difficult. All we have to do is follow the 3 lights. No, not these, and avoid the unkillable creature that's chasing us. Along the way, Lara finds a tome the size of her entire upper body that somehow still fits in her tiny backpack without its weight affecting any of her... Never mind. She also learns that her companion's hair has turned completely white from a scary encounter, which can only be the result of some curse, because that wouldn't happen so quickly in real life. And none of this hocus pocus is ever explained in a way that would satisfy my story-loving brain. Yeah, the level as a whole is a weird experience, to say the least. What the hell was that? Number 9. Red alert. If you had asked me to make this video 10 years ago, I wouldn't even have included New York. Before the remaster, the beginning of this section usually marked the end of my playthrough, as if the game itself ended after Ireland. I don't even remember the exact reason, whether I didn't like the levels themselves, their look, the bugs, or Lara Croft acting like a spy in a Mission Impossible movie for 3 entire levels in a row while wearing an outfit that, in the original graphics, was just a pitch-black person-shaped void with a shiny layer instead of any actual texture. Of course, the remaster fixed that with its fresh coat of paint, but the final level of Chronicles itself is still pretty weird, even keeping in mind that the entire game is basically a collection of stories told by a couple of old men who, for the most part, weren't actually there. It starts with the VCI Tower's outer staircase exploding under fire from a helicopter because apparently Von Croy has no qualms about destroying his own building, his staff, and potentially the Iris itself, just to stop Lara from stealing it. Something similar happens later on, as we get to play through the opening cutscene of Resident Evil Code Veronica in real time. It's fitting for a section that kind of feels like a cautionary tale about the risks and rewards of high tech, which is even more prominent in this level than the 2 previous ones. Lara is fighting machines like helicopters and androids with her own tech, including a gun with 3 different firing modes for different situations, a headset to detect invisible laser beams in what I consider the most unpredictable and annoying stage of the level, and a brand new grappling gun, possibly an early conceptual prototype of the various grapples featured from Legend onwards. Personally, I could have done without the latter as a new addition so late in the game, but it serves its purpose. And as for everything else, while it wasn't love at first sight, I've come to appreciate the unique approach to Tomb Raider level design that the developers were going for here. Number 8. The Submarine and Deep Sea Dive. Technically 2 levels, I'm lumping them together because I think they were meant to work as one, and Deep Sea Dive is too short on its own to qualify as a standalone level. After Lara is taken prisoner by the crew of the submarine she just broke into, we get to play the first of several no-gear levels in Chronicles. As far as the general concept goes, the submarine is similar to Offshore Rig, having us overcome just a few minor challenges while unarmed, instead of putting off the reunion with our beloved twin pistols until the end, like High Security Compound does. If only most of said challenges didn't involve Lara crawling and climbing through air ducts, a rather slow procedure that seems to have replaced the earlier game's crate pushing as a means to artificially increase the length of a level. This is also the first time the game forces us to use stealth to proceed, but doesn't bother to explain how to go about it. While knocking someone out with a crowbar makes perfect sense from a logical point of view, it's not something we've ever seen Lara do before, with a tool that, until this point, had only been used to open doors and break items out of walls. It's one of those aforementioned puzzles that were probably never meant to be puzzles, but become fun when you know what you're expected to do. One thing that really impresses me about this level is how its main location is represented. Never having been on a submarine myself, I can't tell how realistic it is, but some ridiculous dimensions aside, it looks quite like I would imagine it at least. Keeping in mind that the classic Tomb Raider level editor tends to produce awkward results when it tries to depict anything other than caves and tombs, I consider this quite the feat. The ocean floor in the deep sea dive portion is also a sight to behold, and having to make the trip back to the boat in a damaged suit is a nice way to add tension to the end of an otherwise rather slow level. Number 7. Trajan's Markets. Not sure about the pronunciation, but these markets are a real location in Rome believed to be the remnant of the world's most ancient shopping mall, so of course our favourite archaeologist would come here to purchase her stuff. Today's offer, Venus and Mars symbols 100% off while stocks last. All you have to do is negotiate with Mars's representative on Earth and, well, make sure your health insurance is up to date. I have mixed feelings about this level. Its puzzles and exploration are mostly fine, and the continuation of the beautiful architecture from the first Rome level makes me want to travel there myself someday. There aren't too many enemies, but they're all bosses, every single one frustrating in its own way. It says a lot when the most fun boss battle is against a traditional bullet sponge. I remember getting stuck in the Mars room as a child twice in a row. First, it took me a while to realise I was supposed to kill the statue, and then to actually do it, because manual aiming without a mouse, while being targeted no less, is a nightmare for me, and not of the good kind. Today, I sometimes switch to modern controls at this point, just for this one task. The second problem was, I didn't know Lara could manually open floor hatches now, or that there was a hatch here in the first place. Remember, there was no hand icon to point out interactive objects back then. Most of the door interaction was done via keys and switches anyway, so I ended up discovering the secret rows in the back room long before the intended path forward. But that hatch is no longer an issue for me nowadays, contrary to the final fight against those 3 serpent thingies that accidentally got splashed with Dr. Stone's revival fluid. I always found it ridiculous how much health they have, but now with the boss health bars turned on, I realise I'm not even hitting them most of the time. If there's a strategy, I haven't figured it out yet, and if you ask me whether or not I like this level, my answer will vary depending on whether or not I've already finished jumping back and forth for half an hour, shooting these bitches until they finally explode. So I think the middle of the list is a good spot for Trajan's Markets. Number 6. Streets of Rome. Look, we're wearing an elegant dress. Yes, it's a mod, but a necessary one to correct the developer's mistake of putting Lara in her classic outfit for this section of the game. Don't get me wrong, I love the classic outfit, but the cutscene just a second ago showed her leaving the opera house in a dress, which was both fitting for the occasion and revealing enough to let us know for certain that she wasn't wearing anything else underneath. So where did that change of clothes and the backpack suddenly come from? It makes no sense, and having her fight and jump around in a dress and high heels for once is much more badass anyway, so here we go. Streets of Rome is the very first level of Tomb Raider Chronicles, and by far the easiest, even featuring an optional obstacle course where Lara explains the controls herself, similar to Croft Manor. On the flip side, it contains two of the most obscure secrets, not because they're hard to get, but because you have to know that certain actions like shooting the bell and turning one of the bird statues do more than just open the doors right in front of you. These are the first of many instances of this game expecting you to use the psychic abilities that your mother never told you you had, because chances are you don't actually have them. But as I said in the intro, this no longer bothers me that much, and I just enjoy the levels for what they are. While I don't think any street near an opera house in Italy's capital would be this empty at any time of the day, the urban scenery is beautifully crafted, on par with the unnamed French beach city in The Lost Artifact. The light puzzles and combat, combined with the level's short length, do an excellent job at easing us into the memory of what was, according to her friends, one of Lara's first treasure hunting adventures. Number 5. The 13th floor. I still don't consider the VCI section a fitting representation of Tomb Raider as a whole, but I do appreciate the ambitious change of scenery, similar to Area 51, and the showcase of what our infiltration of Lee Cosmetics could have been, if not for someone in TR3's development team finding the sewers way more exciting. It's also one of the few levels where I don't mind Zip. While I hated his constant chatter in Legend, a game with a puzzle difficulty setting just high enough to confuse a toddler, his presence here makes a lot more sense and his tips are more appreciated because the solutions to our problems in this somewhat unusual level complex aren't always immediately obvious. Neither is the story, now that I think about it. What exactly does Lara want with the iris of all things? Granted, it's arguably one of the most interesting artifacts in the entire series, but Von Croy was the one who found and recovered it in Cambodia, while Lara argued to leave it be. So why does she suddenly act like she's more entitled to it? Because she's being a troll for shits and giggles again, that's why. But the fact that we're playing as the villain in this scenario does not detract from all the fun that can be had sneaking through these pristine halls, defeating heavily armed goons with a few drops of chloroform and a good old neck snap, and, for the first time in the series, actually using the power of the artifact ourselves rather than just collecting it and putting it away forever. Apparently, said power is teleportation, which explains how Von Croy escaped his predicament back in Cambodia. I really want to learn more about the iris and what else it can do, so that's one thing I think this level could have elaborated on further, perhaps even have Zip explain it later. For now, let's grab it and get out of here. Number 4. Escape with the iris. Another no-gear level, and in a creative twist this time, instead of getting knocked out and having her gun taken away, Lara leaves it behind more or less willingly to avoid being shot dead by the metal-detecting security system. Which is too bad, because as you'll realise by the end of the level, the door to the exit was in the very next room all along, but you need to blow it open with your gun, and so you'll spend the rest of the level looking for a way to get back here and deactivate the security system in order to do just that. This is the chapter that sees the most use of the stealth mechanic I previously criticised for being half-baked, and it can get a little tedious at times, not because of the lack of combat, but the repetitive things it has us do, such as searching every drawer and cabinet we come across. But to be fair, that's a problem plaguing the entire game, not just the VCI section. In a rather strange turn of events, I have to praise the implementation of tightrope walking, a new mechanic that is normally neither fun nor challenging and would quickly overstay its welcome if it was overused. But this level uses it only once, and in the scene where it makes the most sense. We also get a nice view of the New York skyline as we're raiding the high-tech skyscrapers' offices by night, an unexpected action scene where we need to survive an elevator crash, puzzles and obstacles unique to this location. And everything is so cleverly put together that I can't help having a lot of fun with this level, despite it belonging to a section that I used to ignore completely. How the times have changed. Number 3. The Colosseum. I've stated previously that Russia is the section of Tomb Raider Chronicles with the strongest story, but Rome's is by far the most intriguing one in my opinion, just because of this final level. You may think, okay, she's in the Colosseum, a real place, just like Trajan's markets, what's the big deal? Well, considering the hostile warriors in ancient-looking armor and their equally ancient weapons, the state of the building, its enormous size that doesn't really fit in with the architecture of the city outside, and the fact that we came in through a glowing portal, it all makes me think that this isn't actually the Colosseum as we know it. I dismissed the theory the first time I heard it, but there doesn't seem to be a better explanation, so what if we actually travelled back in time? That might even clear up the narrative inconsistency of Pierre falling to his apparent death in the Colosseum, just to turn up again in Tomb Raider 1, none the worse for wear, and why Lara is so casual about it. Perhaps when she travels back to the present, she returns to the exact moment she left and prevents him from going in after her, therefore undoing his death. We never get to see it, so who knows? How exactly she gets back is its own can of worms, however, since the glowing portal is gone the second time she enters the room with the Philosopher's Stone. Even if it was still there, it's impenetrable from the inside, and as far as I know, the Philosopher's Stone is traditionally credited with the power of transmutation, not time travel. It's all very mysterious and makes me wish the developers had released companion books of some sort back in the day to explain the thought processes behind some of their ideas. But even without knowing exactly what's going on, I still enjoy this level for combining impressive visuals with engaging gameplay and generally being the most Tomb Raider-y of them all, at least in this installment. Number 2. Gallows Tree. One of the few things I liked about The Last Revelation was its introduction of young Lara, and Chronicles expanded on the concept by giving us an entire 3-level section with her. Although I wasn't even nearly 16 when I got to play these games for the first time, I still enjoyed meeting a version of Lara Croft that was at least closer to me in age than her usual adult self. It made her adventure feel a lot more personal. A nightmare fetishist since early childhood, I'm not surprised that my 2 favourite levels from this game belong to its scariest section. Facing demons and other ungodly creatures on a rainy island by night is no longer an item on my bucket list these days, because just like the heat of the beautiful Nevada desert, I probably wouldn't survive it. But that's the great thing about Tomb Raider games. They allow us to explore all those crazy scenarios without judgment. I'm a little confused about the plot here. A demon asks Lara to retrieve his missing heart, which she does, but instead of returning it to him, which probably wouldn't have been the wisest course of action anyway, she just plugs it in a random hole to open a door in a completely different area. Other than that, the puzzles are once again fun when you know their solutions. Young Lara doesn't bring firearms, but does get creative with improvised weapons such as a slingshot to shoot down a bell and its iron clapper to ward off the evil tooth fairies. There's at least some foreshadowing for the latter, because Father Patrick tells her to do exactly that in a cutscene before it becomes relevant. Speaking of the priest, I love his complete lack of a reaction to Lara's presence. He's not the least bit shocked or angry at this nosy brat for following him to a cursed island. And it doesn't come across as bad writing either, more like he knows her and totally expected this to happen, but also trusts her enough to not babysit her. I think the 2 of them make a good team, which I don't often say about people accompanying Lara on her adventures, although to be fair, it was actually the other way around in this case. Number 1. Old Mill. After a brilliant first act and a slightly awkward interlude in the form of Labyrinth, the island section continues to impress. Old Mill looks and plays pretty much the same as Gallows Tree, and there isn't a huge gap between them in my evaluation. The main reason I'm putting this level on top is because its plot makes more sense, or in other words, we actually know what we're doing this time around, instead of just stumbling from one unexplained supernatural mystery into another. A demonic knight keeps disturbing Lara's peaceful stroll, so she takes Father Patrick's advice to heart and collects the necessary tools to draw a protective circle on the ground. Whee! Whether the priest was being sarcastic or this solution would actually have worked, we never find out because the demon attacks again before Lara manages to finish her occult piece of art, kidnapping Father Patrick in the process.
Ouch!
He explains that he's been trapped on this island for centuries because he can't cross running water, and tasks Lara with finding a way to stop the stream if she ever wants to see her friend again. Of course, he has no intentions of letting her live afterwards, but she wasn't going to dedicate a page in her friendship book to him anyway, so after gaining control over him by reading his name in the 100-kilo demon catalogue from the chapel, she tells him to go fuck himself, which he does off-screen. Contrary to what I believed as a child, this isn't the same demon who sent us looking for his heart in the first level, and he also doesn't seem to have any connection to the fire-fearing tooth fairies, the gropey mermaid in the mill pond, or whatever the hell is going on at the chapel. So why exorcising this one entity apparently concludes our business on the island is anyone's guess. But it's more of a story than we had 2 levels ago, so I'll take it. Before the franchise was rebooted, I kept hoping that Lara would one day return to this island as an adult to clear up the remaining mysteries, and now I sometimes wonder if some parts of Yamatai, especially the early ones, might have been inspired by this chapter of Chronicles. So, what do you think? Which are your favourite levels? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments. But before I end this video, I'd like to talk a little more about this, in my opinion, very underrated game. Chronicles may be a stew of leftovers, but that doesn't mean it can't be tasty. In fact, every section has its very own distinct taste, look and feel, representing different aspects of Lara's adventures up until this point. Rome offers the most classic Tomb Raider experience, especially in the Colosseum, but the urban area preceding it with its deserted streets and archaic architecture also adds to the feeling of discovery and isolation. Russia feels like an abridged edition of TR2's Oil Rig and Maria Doria chapters, with Lara fighting mobsters in search of an artifact at the bottom of the ocean and losing her weapons in the process. She even alludes to it herself in the intro cutscene by bringing up her previous dealings with the Mafia. Ireland moves away from both ancient ruins and modern environments in favour of an adventure outdoors, embracing the series' darker side while also maintaining a somewhat whimsical feeling throughout its 3 levels to prevent players from getting too scared. And then there's the raid on Von Croy Industries, with a story that brings up an unresolved conflict from the last revelation, and gameplay relying on a stealthy approach to overcome the dangers of a high-tech facility similar to, but more elaborate than TR3's Area 51. There's only one ingredient missing in this stew that we'll never get now that Lara's original biography is no longer canon, but Chronicles would have been the perfect place to adapt it from the game manuals to the screen. The plane crash in the Himalayas. Surely that story is common knowledge among Lara's friends, even though none of them had any direct involvement and could have been told either at the beginning or the end of the game. I would have put it at the end and made it the hardest section, not just as a grand finale, but also as a way of bringing the story full circle by reminding the audience, look what impossible odds Lara managed to overcome in the past. She survived that, so she can survive Egypt too. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be, but perhaps it could be taken into account the next time they reboot the franchise. Until then, I wouldn't be mad if the story DLC that was announced for Legacy of Atlantis wasn't actually unfinished business, but a remake of Lara's first meeting with Pierre, also known as the Rome chapter. On va voir.